She just wanted to sit. That's all. But when the white woman glared at her and said, "You must be in the wrong section," the whole cabin went silent. Every eye turned. Every breath froze. The black woman smiled, calm, graceful, unshaken. She didn't shout. She didn't argue. She just reached into her bag, and what she pulled out changed everything. Before I go on, hit that subscribe button if you believe respect has no color and that dignity should never depend on skin tone. Because what happened next wasn't just about a seat. It was about truth. It was about power. It was about who really belonged in the sky and in this world. It started like any ordinary flight. The soft hum of engines, the faint scent of coffee drifting through first class, the shuffle of passengers finding their seats. A black woman named Ava Johnson walked down the aisle, holding her boarding pass tight. She was dressed with quiet elegance. Navy blazer, silk scarf, a calm that only comes from knowing you've worked hard for every inch of respect you've earned. But before she could place her bag overhead, a sharp voice cut through the air. "Excuse me," said a white woman in a designer dress, her lips curled. "I think you're lost. Coach is back there." Ava froze. The aisle went quiet. Even the flight attendants glanced over, unsure whether to step in. Ava looked at her seat number, 1A. She smiled softly. "No, ma'am. I'm right where I'm supposed to be." But the woman wasn't done. "This section isn't for—" She hesitated, lowering her voice. "People like you." A couple nearby gasped. The tension was electric, burning through the cabin. Ava didn't react. She didn't raise her voice or throw back an insult. She simply placed her bag in the overhead bin, sat down gracefully in her seat, and opened her tablet. Moments later, the pilot's voice came over the intercom. Warm, confident, and unmistakably familiar. "Good afternoon, this is Captain Ava Johnson. Welcome aboard Flight 492, proudly operated by my airline." The woman's face turned pale, because in that instant everyone realized the woman she tried to humiliate didn't just belong in first class. She owned it. The cabin felt like time had stopped. Every passenger turned, some pretending not to stare, others frozen mid-sip of their champagne. The white woman, Rebecca, blinked fast, her cheeks burning. She wanted to speak, but her words tangled somewhere between shock and shame. Ava, now seated, didn't look at her. She didn't need to. Her silence was louder than any argument. Moments later, a flight attendant approached with a nervous smile. "Captain Johnson," she whispered. "Would you like to board the rest of the crew before we taxi out?" Ava stood, smoothed her jacket, and nodded. Her posture was calm, powerful, like someone who's been tested by the world and learned to never let anger steal her grace. As Ava walked toward the cockpit, Rebecca's voice cracked again. "Wait, you're the pilot?" Ava turned just slightly, enough for her eyes to meet Rebecca's. "Yes," she said simply. "I am." And then she disappeared behind the cockpit door. The entire plane sat in stunned silence. A businessman leaned toward Rebecca, whispering, "Guess you picked the wrong seat to steal." Someone chuckled under their breath, and even that quiet laughter felt like justice echoing through the cabin. But this story didn't start on that plane. It started years before. Ava grew up in the South, a daughter of a janitor and a nurse. Her mother used to tell her, "Baby, the sky doesn't belong to anyone. If you want to fly, you fly." When she was a kid, she'd sit outside their small house, watching planes draw white lines across the blue, and she promised herself, "One day, I'll be the one up there." But the road wasn't easy. Flight school wasn't kind to women like Ava. She heard the whispers. "She's here on a diversity program. She won't last a semester." Every time she passed a test, someone said she got lucky. Every time she earned a license, someone said she didn't deserve it. But Ava didn't fight back with words. She fought back with excellence. She graduated top of her class, earned every certification, and eventually bought into a regional airline when investors saw her determination. The sky became her home, a place where no one could judge her color, her gender, or her worth. And now, years later, the very air she once dreamed of owning carried her name. Captain Ava Johnson Airlines. Back on the flight, the intercom clicked again. Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. We're cleared for takeoff. Please fasten your seatbelts. Rebecca shifted uncomfortably, shrinking in her seat. Her fiancé, seated beside her, whispered, "You embarrassed yourself, honey." Rebecca's eyes filled with tears. Not because she was caught, but because something inside her cracked. For the first time, she realized how small prejudice makes you, not the person you aim it at. As the plane lifted into the clouds, she replayed every second, her tone, her words, the look on Ava's face. And something about Ava's calm haunted her. No anger, no spite, just strength. Like she'd carried that weight her whole life and learned to turn it into wings. Halfway through the flight, the cockpit door opened. Ava stepped out for a routine check. Her eyes met Rebecca's again. This time, Rebecca stood. Her voice trembled. "Captain Johnson." I'm sorry." Ava studied her for a moment, not cruelly, not with vengeance, just quietly. Then she nodded once and said, "You don't owe me an apology, ma'am. You owe it to yourself." She turned and walked away. The flight landed hours later to applause. Not the usual polite kind, but genuine, thunderous appreciation. Because the passengers hadn't just taken a trip from New York to Atlanta. They'd witnessed something sacred, dignity refusing to bow. And Rebecca, she stayed behind when everyone left, waiting by the jet bridge. When Ava walked out, Rebecca whispered, "Thank you for showing me what grace really looks like." Ava smiled faintly. "Grace," she said, "isn't weakness. It's power under control." Then she walked away into the golden light outside. A woman who had once been told she didn't belong, now flying above everyone who ever said she couldn't. The terminal was nearly empty when the flight landed. Rain tapped against the glass walls like quiet applause from heaven. Soft, steady, sincere. Captain Ava Johnson walked through the jet bridge, her uniform crisp, her expression calm. But inside, she carried the storm she'd learned to silence for years. Rebecca, the bride-to-be who had mocked her, stood at the gate clutching her handbag, face pale and eyes red from crying. Her fiancé hovered a few steps behind, unsure whether to step forward or stay invisible. "Captain Johnson," Rebecca began softly, voice trembling. "Please, can I have a moment?" Ava stopped. Passengers streamed around them, but for that moment, the world felt frozen. Rebecca's voice cracked. "When I saw you walk into that cockpit, I swear, something inside me broke. I don't even know why I said those things, Her words fell apart. Ava's silence pressed heavy between them. Finally, she said, "You said them because that's what the world taught you to believe." Rebecca's lips parted. "I didn't mean—" Ava raised a hand gently. "I know, most people don't, but meaning nothing still hurts someone. Every word, every assumption. It leaves a mark." Rebecca looked down, tears streaming freely now. "You must hate me." Ava shook her head. "No. Hate is a weight I learned to stop carrying a long time ago." There was something in her voice. Not anger, not pity, but a quiet, unshakable truth. A truth born from struggle. "I used to be you once," Ava continued. "Not in color, but in ignorance. I judged people before I understood their stories. But life has a way of humbling us, doesn't it?" Rebecca nodded weakly, words lost in her throat. Ava leaned slightly closer, her eyes calm but piercing. "You looked at me and saw a woman who didn't belong in that seat. But let me tell you something. I didn't ask the world for permission to sit there. I earned it." Her voice carried a rhythm, steady and commanding, not just to Rebecca, but to everyone who had ever doubted her. "When people said I wasn't good enough, I studied harder. When they closed doors, I built my own runway. And when they laughed, I kept flying. Because grace doesn't mean silence. Grace means knowing who you are and refusing to let hate define it." Rebecca covered her mouth, sobbing quietly. "I've been blind my whole life," she whispered. "I thought I was above people who served me. But I was the one living below compassion." Ava exhaled slowly, her gaze softening. "The world doesn't need more shame, Rebecca. It needs more people brave enough to change." Rebecca nodded through her tears. How do I start?" Ava smiled faintly. "Start small. Next time you see someone serving you, look them in the eye. Say, 'Thank you,' and mean it. See people, really see them. Not through color or class or labels, but through heart. At that moment, a young boy ran past holding a toy airplane. His laughter filled the air, pure and unburdened. Ava watched him, and for a second, she saw herself, that same child who once dreamed of flying when everyone told her to stay grounded. Rebecca followed her gaze. That must have been you once. Ava nodded softly. Still is. Every time I fly, that little girl's still inside me, reminding me why I never gave up. Rebecca took a step closer. I don't deserve your forgiveness. Ava's eyes glistened. Maybe not. But forgiveness isn't about who deserves it. It's about who needs it. The words hit deep. Not just for Rebecca, but for anyone who's ever carried the weight of guilt or judgment. Suddenly, the airport loudspeaker called, "Captain Johnson, you're needed at gate 12 for your next flight." Ava nodded politely and adjusted her cap. "I have to go." Rebecca wiped her tears. "Captain, I'll remember this. I swear." Ava paused before walking away. "Don't just remember it," she said quietly. "Live it." She walked toward gate 12, heels clicking against the polished floor, every step a reminder of how far she'd come. As she disappeared down the corridor, Rebecca turned to her fiancé. "She could have destroyed me in front of everyone. But she didn't." He nodded slowly. "That's what real strength looks like." Outside, the rain had stopped. The sky opened, golden light spilling through clouds, like hope returning after a long night. Rebecca looked up, whispering, "Thank you, Captain." And for the first time, she didn't just see a uniform. She saw a woman who refused to let the world tell her who she was. Up above, Ava's plane ascended into the sunlit sky, quiet, powerful, free. And in that climb was more than flight. It was redemption, resilience, and the proof that dignity needs no permission to rise. The engines roared softly above the clouds. Captain Ava Johnson leaned back in her seat, the world below shrinking into a blanket of white and gold. The sky was calm now, just like her heart. She thought of Rebecca, that tearful woman at the gate, broken open by her own awakening. Not out of pity, but because Ava had seen it before, dozens of times. People realizing too late that prejudice doesn't just wound the one it's aimed at. It poisons the soul of the one who carries it. She took a slow breath and smiled faintly. "One down," she whispered to herself. "One more person who might finally see, because that's how real change begins. Not in grand speeches, but in the quiet undoing of ignorance. One heart at a time." Down below, Rebecca sat in her car at the airport parking lot, rain streaks still clinging to the windshield. Her wedding was next week, but for the first time in her life, she didn't feel like celebrating. Not until she made something right. She picked up her phone and called her event planner. "Cancel the fancy catering. We're donating the food to a shelter downtown." The planner gasped on the other end. Rebecca continued, her voice steady. "And please, invite the staff who work behind the scenes. The cooks, the cleaners, everyone. I want them to eat first." That night, Rebecca didn't sleep. She sat up replaying Ava's words in her head. See people. Really see them. The next morning, she drove to a local diner. The same kind of place she used to overlook. A young black waitress greeted her with a warm smile. "Morning, ma'am. Coffee?" Rebecca met her eyes and nodded. "Yes, and thank you for working so hard." The waitress blinked, surprised, but smiled wider. That's how it starts. One act of respect. One moment of seeing humanity where you once ignored it. Meanwhile, the world kept spinning. Social media buzzed with photos of a viral encounter. Passengers had filmed Ava's silent composure during the confrontation at the airport. "This is my airline" began trending. Not as outrage, but as inspiration. Comments poured in. She carried herself with so much grace. She didn't need to shout. Her strength spoke louder. "My daughter saw this and said she wants to be a pilot now." For the first time in her career, Ava's inbox overflowed. Not with criticism or doubt, but with gratitude. Letters from young girls, women of color, and even men who had once been silent about injustice. One message stood out. It read, "I used to be ashamed of where I came from, but after watching you handle hate with dignity, I know now. My worth isn't up for debate." Ava read it twice, her eyes glistening. Sometimes pain can become purpose. Sometimes the moment that tried to break you becomes the reason someone else stands taller. Weeks later, Rebecca arrived at her wedding. Not in glitter or diamonds, but in simplicity. No champagne towers, no golden plates, just love. Real, human love. When she stood to give a short speech, her voice trembled. I once hurt someone deeply, someone who showed me what true grace looks like. And today, before I begin this new life, I want to say to everyone here, if you think kindness makes you small, you've never met real strength. The guests clapped softly, unaware of the full story. But Rebecca knew, and so did her heart. Across the country, Ava flew her next flight, New York to Atlanta. She greeted each crew member with warmth, each passenger with calm confidence. To most, she was just another pilot. But to those who knew her story, she was a symbol of quiet revolution. As the plane touched down and passengers clapped softly, a little girl peeked into the cockpit. "Are you the captain?" she asked in awe. Ava turned, smiling. "Yes, sweetheart, I am." The girl's mother, a black woman holding a worn leather Bible, whispered, "She's been telling everyone she wants to fly someday." Ava knelt, eye level with the child. "Then don't ever let anyone tell you that you can't. The sky doesn't care what color you are. It only cares how high you're willing to go." The little girl grinned. "I'm going to fly higher than clouds." Ava laughed. "That's what I like to hear." As they walked away, Ava looked out the window once more. The sun dipped beneath the clouds, painting the horizon in gold, like forgiveness lighting the edge of darkness. And in that silence, one truth lingered. Change doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers. Sometimes it's just a woman standing tall in her truth, teaching the world that dignity needs no permission. In a world obsessed with status, may we never forget, the real measure of worth isn't what's worn on your skin, but what's carried in your heart.